Hello, 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 salud. I am the Rasta Witch. Here's where we learn the way of the Yan Sui Rasta, which is to say, my kind of Ital. Please subscribe and begin your own kind of Yan Sui witchcraft. All roads lead to Rome. Home. Hi, how you doing? Okay, this is the big one, the real special one. The life of Haile Selassie I and the opening of the seven seals. Okay, so the Haile Selassie I is the Lion of Judah from Revelations 5:5. Um, and if you've read the book of Revelations, you know that there were seven seals, and only the Lion of Judah could open the seven seals. So what is a Rasta? A Rasta is, there's many different versions of Rasta, but the thing that all Rastas have in common is we all believe that Haile Selassie is the Lion of Judah in Revelations 5:5. So if he's the Lion of Judah of Revelations 5:5, then he has to open the seven seals or he's not the Lion of Judah. So did he open the seven seals? That's what this is about, starting with his birth story and just the life of Haile Selassie and the opening of the seven seals. So I'm reading this right out of the Dragonfly Sutra. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the long period of time and times and dividing of times, or 42 months, 1,260 years, in which the papal powers made war upon the saints. Quote, shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from the firmament, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. End quote. Matthew 24:29. On May 19th, 1790, history records what became known as the Dark Day. On this day, the earth became dark all day and night. Quote, a sheet of white paper held within a few inches of the face was equally invisible with the blackest velvet, end quote, said Dr. Samuel Tenney, Massachusetts Historical Society, Volume 1, 179215. Again, on the morning of November 13th, 1833, the stars fell. Professor Denison Olmsted, the celebrated astronomer of Yale College, wrote, quote, this was the greatest display of celestial fireworks that has ever been since the Almighty God created this world, or at least within the annals of history, end quote. If a person of the days of Jesus could see the condition of the earth today, all the pollution, so much that the moon is blood red, that would be much concerning. In the year 1892, there appeared in the heavens a star of great significance, which had never been seen before. The world marveled, and the stargazers wondered what would be the meaning of this star. A new star in all its heavenly glory on high. Tensions were also aroused in Harar, Ethiopia, where the governor of Ras Makonnen and his wife, Woizro Yeshimebet Ali, lived. In the high mountain town of Ajarsagoro, Yeshimebet was with child, and both father and mother, along with the people, prayed earnestly for her safe delivery, as none of her previous babies had lived. Ras Makonnen, too, while on his veranda in solemn meditation and prayer, had noticed this star and hoped that it was a sign of victory. He had wanted a son, and his prayer reached the very high heavens. The women in the tukal, that's an Ethiopian hut, with the mother, chorused with one another, coming out of the tukal, Mary, Mary, be near her. It should not be long now. They chorused low, 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 and the women on the veranda took it up low, low, low. At this very moment there came a sudden crash of thunder and lightning, and the longed-for rain began to pour down upon the dry earth. The Lord has answered our prayers. A son has been born. And they fired their rifles into the air, singing songs of praise. Soon shots were being fired all over Ethiopia. Ross McConan leapt into the air, overwhelmed with joy. He mounted his mule, went to the Tukal, and beheld his new son, Selah. Ross McConan's son, Tafari McConan, later at the coronation in 1930 was renamed Haile Selassie I, was born July 23rd, 1892, in the sign of Leo. As with Jesus, when the papal powers of the red dragon Babylon saw all these signs in the heavens, knowing what it meant, they sent armies to kill the boy. History records it was for the political and economic wealth and expansion of Italy's empire. Also, the real hidden reason was to kill the Christ child Tafari McConan. In 1896, they went to Ethiopia, their armies, to fight the Battle of Ottawa. After Tafari's birth, the Pope had been informed by reports coming out of Ethiopia that the Christ child lives. Upon the death of Lij Tafari's mother, he was raised by his cousin, Ross Imru. He was soon able to speak and write in Amharic and Ge'ez. He also was able to speak French fluently, as he was taught by his private tutor, a Guadeloupean, Dr. Joseph Vitaling. Growing up as a liege in the province of Harar had many unique opportunities, because it is where foreigners would come, being near the sea. So he grew up around this, appreciating European peoples and modern living. Growing up in the royal family as a Christian in Harar was diverse, as it had many Muslims too. Queer tales began to circulate about Tafari's boyhood, the most notable concerning his supposed ability to speak to animals. During his youth, it was claimed, he had on several occasions been seen conversing in the bush with leopards and lions, the fierce jungle beasts becoming docile at his feet. Further, it was said that as a young student, Tafari was quite bright and competent in his lessons, but that he had truly astonished the priests with the depth of his knowledge concerning religious and mystical matters. Not only could he quote freely from the Kebra Nagast, but also from the Book of Kufale, the Book of Enoch, the Shepherd of Hermas, Judith, Tobit, Ecclesiasticus, the Matshufa Burhan, or the Book of Light, the 6th and 7th books of Moses, the books of Eden, secretly deleted from Genesis during the Dark Ages, all 31 books of the Hebrew Bible, the 21 canonical books of the New Testament, and numerous other apocryphal and pseudepigraphical works. According to one story, a local priest in Harar had visited the young Tafari shortly after the death of his father, and asked him where he had gained such a vast knowledge. Tafari replied much of it had come to him at the moment of his baptism, conducted according to tradition in the 40th day of his life. The priest who presided at the ceremony had opened Tafari's eyes with the first touch of Holy Chrism, and everything that ensued was as comprehensive to the infant as if he had been an adult. The priest pronounced his surname, he remembered, and his next baptismal name. And then, of course, he blew softly in Tafari's face to drive off the evil spirits. At that instant, Tafari claimed, he felt himself enveloped by a golden glow. And as the priest began to anoint him, water touching his forehead, breast, shoulders, and all of the 37 prescribed places, he felt his knowledge increase, filling him up like a vessel and endowing him with a great sense of clarity about creation. His wide range of reading branched out into mathematics and economics, geography and history. He was the school's star pupil, and not simply because he wanted to please the emperor. He found a stimulating and exciting new world emerging from his books and lectures. And his hours in the classroom whetted an appetite for education and for educating others, which has never left him. The priest inquired, when the birds and the beasts and even the insects began to greet him and speak to him, reminding him of what he already knew, asking which was the first creature to speak to him. Tafari requested a sheet of paper in response, and some pastels, and began to draw with extraordinary facility a picture of a bird. It resembled a dove, but with exotic multicolored plumage. The priest was about to ask Tafari what sort of bird it was, when he was dumbfounded to see the bird fly off the page and out through the nearby window, disappearing into the sky. So a lot of this is being quoted from Jahug, verse 7. Rumors cropped up in Addis Ababa. Even Rastafari trusted personal counselors. He became Djazmach at the age of 13. That means count. And at 14, his father sent him to live with Emperor Menelik II. Soon after his father died, and soon he became governor of Salale, then Baso, then Sidamo. In 1910, he becomes governor of Harar, like his father. Soon he becomes a Ras, which means duke. They were terrified of him. People were terrified of him, reluctant to shake his hand or gaze directly upon his stark features, with his pointed nose, sparse beard, and penetrating, almost black eyes, all framed by wild, bushy hair. So there's Tafari Makonnen. That's what he would have been known when he was born. His dad's name was Makonnen, Tafari Makonnen. There's Tafari Makonnen and his dad, Ras Makonnen, who was governor of Harar Province, cousin and friends to Emperor Menelik II. There's Haile Selassie I's coronation picture. That's when he was just Ras and not emperor yet, Ras Tafari. Marcus Garvey, his friend Herbert Armstrong, the first Rasta, Leonard P. Howe, and Bob Marley. He, Rastafari, was a very unique and magical person, to say the least. As emperor after 1930, he always put education, especially of the youth, as top priority, giving Ethiopia its first printing press and university, hospitals and roads, planes, cars, and many more modern things. He called his program modernization. This made him very feared and controversial. Many did not like his fondness of things European. Marcus Garvey called him a white people lover, and indeed he was. Quote, here's a quote from Selassie I. Free the human race from superstition and fear that originate from ignorance. Transcend the apparent obstacles of race and religion, and recognize the blood ties of the whole human race. Haile Selassie I. On an international level, the most significant thing he did was open the 7 seals of the book of Revelations in the Bible. As it says, only the Lion of Judah can do that. The opening of the seals help us to understand prophecy, putting the proper chronology to it, and defining it in modern day. This shows us who Babylon is, the great downpresser, so we can overcome, begin the millennium of peace, and fulfill the Bible, putting it in the past, so we can move past it and modernize and grow. So I've gone over this in my playlist called About the Bible Discussions. So I won't go into detail of that. I have videos on Selassie I and all that, and how it fits into it all. This all begins with the significant moment that enabled him to become emperor of Ethiopia. He had many obstacles to gain the crown, but the big moment was when he defeated the armies of Negus Michael in Ethiopia. So the opening of the seals are things I learned from Haile Selassie. This is Haile Selassie's book about the opening of the 7 seals. When this happened, it was the opening of the first seal in 1916. This makes Haile Selassie I the rider of the white horse, having the bow, conquering the armies of Ras Michael, making him the conquering Lion of Judah. Revelation 6, 1-2. So the seals 1 through 6 are all opened in the 6th chapter. So the first 2 verses are about the first seal and the rider of the white horse. The rider of the white horse is Haile Selassie I, who went forth conquering and to conquer, so he becomes the conquering Lion of Judah. And that's when he beat the armies of Ras Michael. And that was a necessary moment to make him emperor. In 1930, Rastafari finally became emperor, was given the golden crown, and his wife too, Empress Menen. Rastafari then changed his name to the new name, Haile Selassie I, meaning power of the Trinity, the name of our goddess, Mother Nature, Jah. Haile Selassie I began to modernize Ethiopia. He abolished slavery, had Ethiopia's first constitution made, patterned after America's constitution, and much, much more. This did not sit well with the papal powers of Babylon and Mussolini. This started the problem with the incident at Walwal, Ethiopia. But by 1935-36, it became the Italo-Ethiopian War. We have seen the photo of Haile Selassie I putting his foot on the bomb that the Pope blessed to kill the Ethiopians. In 1936, it got so bad, Italy was using illegal warfare against Ethiopia, killing the animals and humans. We have seen the photos to be sent home to Italy of decapitated Ethiopians, stacked up so Nazi soldiers could pose, fascist soldiers I should say, they became Nazi later, proud of what they had done. Haile Selassie I had to do something about it, quick, or all the people, buildings, churches, and animals would go extinct. So he went into exile in Bath, England, and Italy took Ethiopia. The war ended. So To plead Ethiopia's case before the League of Nations, Haile Selassie I gave one of history's most famous and iconic speeches on June 30th, 1936. This speech was the opening of the second seal. He stated in the speech that the whole point of the League of Nations is for them to protect and help the smaller nations at times such as this. Italy was breaking the law, their law, so that they must put their foot down, or else what's the point of having such an organization as the League of Nations in the first place? Bob Marley made a song of part of this famous speech in a song called War. Bob's song War happens to be the motto of the Answe faith. The song's chorus is from what Jesus said of the last days in Matthew 24, singing wars and rumors of wars. And the verses are written by Haile Selassie I from this very speech before the League in 1936, the opening of the second seal, Revelation 6:2-4. Meanwhile, another Nazi leader, Adolf Hitler, was falling in love with the great sword, the spear of destiny, also called the Holy Lance. This great sword was the very sword that pierced Jesus' side on the cross. It was on display in a museum in Italy. Soon it was given to Hitler, as he wanted it so very badly. Hitler was the rider of the red horse. Haile Selassie I stayed in exile for 5 years in Bath, England, 1936 to 1941. In this time he gained many friends and supporters, including Sylvia Pankhurst, the Sister Christabel, who were leaders of the suffrage movement in England. Sylvia pleaded with her friend Haile Selassie I's case. Finally, the British armies and some African freedom fighters snuck back into Ethiopia and took back the country from Italy, putting Haile Selassie I back on the throne in Ethiopia. So the rider of the red horse would be given a great sword, it says. So that's why that was brought up. President of the United States of America, Harry S. Truman, dropped the black bomb on Japanese in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. World War II had many sparks, including the Second Italo-Ethiopian War in 1936, to start the fire that became World War II. But now the war finally ended. World War II was over. Soon after, the Cold War began. But in the interbellum, there was time for the world to sit down and talk peace again. With Harry S. Truman as the President of the United States, more than 50 heads of state were invited to San Francisco to a swearing in of the United Nations Charter by member states, most of whom were also members of the now defunct League of Nations. The agreement was signed on the 24th of October, 1945. The League of Nations, the United Nations, or the UN, called the UN, arose out of the ashes of the no more League of Nations, as its fundamental policy was the same as before. If any member state has a dispute with another country, the UN acts as a world policeman to ensure that justice is done and not undone, as it were. In this manner, it functions as a courthouse of and for international law. It consists of such working organs as ILO, IBRO, WIPO, GATT, UNESCO, etc., each with a specific overview in areas such as labor, trade, science, culture, education, all of which are of crucial importance to the international community. Haile Selassie I was the only person to address both the League of Nations and the UN in the capacity of head of state. In 1949, at the fourth sitting of the General Assembly, Haile Selassie I addressed a packed chamber on the 20th of September. Haile Selassie I considered the UN man's last hope of maintaining world peace. his speech, quote, "The League of Nations failed basically because of its inability to prevent aggression. But neither the depth of that failure nor the intervening catastrophes could dull the perception of the need and the search for peace through collective security. So it is that here in the United States we have dedicated ourselves anew to those high and indeed essential ideals, essential if the world is to continue on to the path of peace." End quote. This speech was the opening of the third seal, Revelation 6:5-6, and the month that this treaty was signed. The organs of the UN, the WHO, the World Health Organization, and the FAO, the Food and Agricultural Organization, echoed, quote, "A measure of wheat for a penny and 3 measures of barley for a penny," end quote. So that's what it says in that seal, and that's what their policy was at that time. A measure of wheat for a penny and 3 measures of barley for a penny. And the month that was signed in was ruled by the scales, Libra in astrology. "And see that thou," end quote, "see that thou hurt not the oil and the wine." Of course, that's what Babylon cares about. The oil and the wine. The rider of the black horse, with these scales, the balances, in the palm of his hands, was Harry S. Truman. Soon after World War II was started the Cold War. Russia, America, and Great Britain, who were allies, held a meeting that became known as the Yalta Peace Talks. It was agreed that Russia should gain some advantage to the countries like Poland, Romania, Bulgaria, and Hungary, to name a few. Soon the Russians placed heavy restrictions on the Western visitors gaining dominance in Eastern Europe. Harry S. Truman declared to those countries that assistance would be given to repel a communist encroachment and to keep Russia at bay. This political canon, spawned in 1947, became known as the Truman Doctrine.